Every time you ask an AI a question, somewhere a data center pulls more power. And all that power runs through one metal: copper. Miles of it. The world is now so hungry for copper that demand could jump 50% by 2040. So where is all of it going to come from? Part of the answer sits in the middle of the Gobi Desert. In a landlocked country of just 3.5 million people, wedged between Russia and China, Mongolia, and it is quietly building what will soon be the fourth largest copper mine on the entire planet. The mine is called Oyu Tolgoi. In Mongolian, it means turquoise hill, named for the blue-green color of oxidized copper staining the surface rock. And it is enormous. Oyu Tolgoi sits on one of the largest known copper and gold deposits on Earth. Buried under the empty steppe of the southern Gobi, just 80 kilometers from the Chinese border, the open pit began producing back in 2013. But the real prize was always far deeper. More than a kilometer below the surface lies a layer of ore so rich and so vast that it justified one of the most expensive mining projects ever attempted. To reach it, the operator, the mining giant Rio Tinto, and the Mongolian government built an underground mine using a technique called block caving. In simple terms, they undermine the ore body and let gravity collapse it into a network of tunnels. Then haul it to the surface. The scale is hard to grasp. The underground expansion alone cost more than $7 billion. Total capital poured into the project has now passed $26 billion. Engineers sank a shaft over a kilometer deep, carved out hundreds of kilometers of tunnels, and built what is effectively a small city in one of the most remote deserts in the world. Complete with its own airport, paved roads, and power supply trucked in across the sand. For a country whose entire economy is smaller than a single mid-sized city in the West, this was a bet of almost unimaginable proportions. For years, that bet looked shaky. The underground project ran years behind schedule and billions over budget, and critics wondered if it would ever pay off. But in 2025, the numbers finally turned. Copper output from the underground mine jumped 61% in a single year. Oyu Tolgoi now produces over 400,000 tons of copper annually. And it is racing toward 500,000. Here is why that number matters so much. From 2028 onward, the mine is expected to deliver an average of around 500,000 tons of copper every single year. For nearly a decade straight. At that rate, by 2030, Oyu Tolgoi will be the fourth largest copper mine on the planet. Let that sink in. Not a big mine in Asia. Not a regional player. The fourth largest copper mine in the world. In a country most people could not point to on a map. And the money flowing back is very real. In 2025 alone, the mine paid $660 million in taxes and fees to the Mongolian state. For a nation of 3.5 million people, that single payment is a meaningful slice of the entire national budget. Money that can fund hospitals, schools, and roads. The ramp-up also marked a symbolic turning point. In late 2025, Oyu Tolgoi appointed its first-ever Mongolian chief executive, after years of being run by foreign managers. That was a clear signal. Mongolia no longer wants to be just a landlord collecting rent on its own resources. It wants control. So why is the world suddenly so desperate for Mongolian copper? Two words: electrification and AI. Copper is, quite literally, the metal of electricity. It is in every wire, every motor, every transformer, every charging cable on Earth. An electric car uses roughly 4 times as much copper as a gasoline car. A single wind turbine can hold tons of it. And now there is a new, ravenous customer entering the market: data centers. The build-out for artificial intelligence is staggering in scale. Goldman Sachs expects power demand from data centers to rise around 165% by 2030. And every watt of that power needs copper to move it and to cool the machines. By 2030, AI data centers alone could swallow 500,000 tons of copper a year. That is roughly the entire output of Oyu Tolgoi, consumed by server farms, now added all together. And the projections become eye-watering. S&P Global expects global copper demand to climb from 28 million tons in 2025 to 42 million tons by 2040. That is a 50% jump in just 15 years. The problem is brutal. The supply simply is not there. Existing mines are aging, ore grades are falling, and new deposits take 10 to 20 years to bring online. Without major new projects, S&P warns the world could face a shortfall of around 10 million tons of copper a year by 2040. That gap is larger than the combined output of the dozen biggest mines operating today. In a world like that, every new ton of copper becomes strategic, and a mine that can reliably pump out 500,000 tons a year suddenly becomes one of the most important pieces of ground on the planet. But here is the catch. And it is a big one. Mongolia is landlocked. Completely. It has exactly two neighbors on Earth. Russia to the north, and China to the south. And almost everything it sells goes in one single direction. Around 90% of Mongolia's exports flow to China. Its copper concentrate is loaded onto trucks and hauled a short distance across the Gobi. Straight into Chinese smelters waiting just over the border. There is no port, no alternative buyer at scale, no realistic way to play one customer off against another. Think carefully about what that means. Mongolia has dug up one of the most valuable resources of the 21st century. But it can effectively only sell that resource to a single neighbor. And that neighbor sets much of the terms. When copper prices are high and China is buying, Mongolia does beautifully. But when China's economy slows, or when Beijing wants political leverage, Ulaanbaatar feels it almost immediately. Mongolians actually have a phrase for this predicament. They talk about needing a third neighbor, a way to balance the two giants pressing in on their borders. Whether that partner is the United States, Japan, South Korea, or the European Union, but geography is merciless. You can sign all the friendship treaties and trade agreements you like. The copper still has to physically leave the country, and for now the only road out that actually works runs through China. This is the central tension of the entire Mongolian story. The very thing that made the country rich is also the thing that keeps it dependent. And this is exactly why a remote mine in the Gobi has suddenly become a piece on the global chessboard. For most of history, Mongolia was a quiet buffer state, a vast empty space between two great powers that the rest of the world barely thought about. Copper changed that overnight, as Washington, Brussels, Tokyo, and Seoul wake up to how dependent they have become on China for processed metals and critical minerals. They have started looking hard at the map for alternatives. And there, sitting on top of one of the planet's great copper deposits, is a functioning democracy that very much wants new friends. Mongolia has leaned into this. It has signed critical minerals understandings with the United States and courted partners across the developed world. Dangling not just copper but rare earths, coal, and uranium. The pitch is simple and powerful. We have the resources the green and digital economy needs. And unlike some suppliers, we would rather not sell them all to Beijing. The catch, of course, is the same one as before. Geography. Even the most enthusiastic foreign partner runs straight into the wall of Mongolian logistics. There is no coastline. The nearest friendly port is hundreds of kilometers away across someone else's territory. Some have floated wild ideas. From dedicated rail corridors through Russia to flying high-value concentrate out by air. But none of it is cheap. And none of it changes the basic math quickly. So Mongolia finds itself in a strange and revealing position. It holds something the most powerful economies on Earth increasingly need. And it is being courted from every direction. Yet it remains physically locked between the only two countries that can easily move its treasure to market. It is a perfect, miniature case study in the new resource geopolitics of the 21st century. So what does all this copper actually mean for Mongolia itself? The upside is genuinely transformational. When fully ramped up, Oyu Tolgoi is expected to account for more than 30% of Mongolia's entire economy. 30% of a national economy. From a single mine in the desert. That kind of money can build hospitals, pave roads, fund schools, and lift an entire generation out of poverty. At times Mongolia's growth rate has been among the fastest in all of Asia. Powered almost entirely by what comes out of the ground. But there is a shadow side. And economists have a well-worn name for it. The resource curse. When one commodity comes to dominate an economy, Everything becomes hostage to its price. A copper boom floods the country with foreign dollars, pushing up the local currency and quietly making every other industry uncompetitive. Then the price eventually crashes. And the national budget crashes right along with it. Mongolia has already lived through exactly this cycle once before, lurching from a giddy mining boom to the edge of bankruptcy and an IMF bailout back in 2017. On top of that, the country has to manage a delicate, often tense dance with Rio Tinto, the foreign giant that actually runs the mine. The two sides have clashed repeatedly over costs, taxes, and who truly controls the asset, a dispute that flared up yet again in 2026. Appointing a Mongolian chief executive was part of the answer. So is the growing push to save windfall revenue inside a sovereign wealth fund, rather than spend every dollar the moment it arrives. Because the real test was never digging the copper out of the ground. It is whether a small, landlocked country can turn a hole in the Gobi Desert into lasting prosperity, without being swallowed by the very wealth buried beneath its feet. That is the story of how an empty desert in Mongolia ended up at the very center of the global race for copper. If you enjoyed it, subscribe for a fresh Asia data story every single day.